Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you're listening into. This is Kyesubire Greg from AfCFTA Files, powered by the Africa MSME Collective. Africa MSME Collective is really a space that supports MSME. We have a lot of programs for medium businesses, larger businesses going to corporate. We have a lot of programs for the upper MSME, and our focus is on the micros and the smalls. Because every business must grow. We believe that a micro should become a small should become a medium should become a corporate. And we firmly believe that when we're able to do that, then we're economically sustainable as a continent. So that's what we're working towards. So welcome to AfCFTA Files. In AfCFTA Files, we unpack and discuss things around the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and Agreement. Now, the area is the largest trading bloc in the world. It has 55 countries in it. It has over 1.3 billion people. It will, when fully implemented, lift 68 million people out of extreme poverty and another maybe 40 million out of just regular poverty. But it will add $560 billion to our economies as a continent when implemented fully. And that for me is significant. So today, I'm answering a question that somebody asked me. And they asked why I always talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and Agreement. Now, it all started in 2020. In 2020 September, I was invited to sit on the board, the international board of the Organization of Women in International Trade. I went in based on my skill as a storyteller and a communicator around social media, and I loved the space. It was a time to interact with international trade lawyers, trade consultants, understand international trade policies, and just realize how little we know as a people. The reality is, if I'm not exporting and I'm not trading, I don't really have a reason to learn anything about trade. And that's what I found. There was so much I didn't know in the trade space. For instance, it was all legalese and jargon and this big stuff that I couldn't understand. But as I spent time on the board, attending webinars, masterclasses, sitting through meetings, traveling and listening to traders and trade experts, I realized more of us need to understand trade. You see, international trade is different from local trade. Local trade, I'm selling in my community, I'm selling with people I understand. We have, by and large, a common culture, common language, common currency. We have a lot in common. When you cross the border and get into international trade, it's a very different ballgame. The other thing that made it a little bit technical for me is I'm in the service sector. By and large, that's where I've sat, that's where I've stayed, and I've not exported a product to save my life. But as I went for these meetings and engagements, I met women who are exporting. I met women who are moving goods, specific goods across the border. I met women in manufacturing. I'm like, oh, that's a completely different mindset. I also met women who want to go into these spaces, but don't know where to start. So my role as a storyteller and a communicator became very clear to me. I can see, I experience, I understand, so I can tell. And the reason why I chose to tell is because the biggest impediment in international trade is one word: access. Access is the ability to connect to and use something. So when it comes to access around trade, the biggest impediment I found, maybe not all of them, but the ones that really stood out for me, was access to three things: access to information, access to finance, and access to network. And let me break down all three. When you're trading, you need to understand the requirements, you need to know the standards, You need to know the regulations. You need to understand your customer on the other end. What quantity do they like? Do they like your product in a larger bottle? Is it glass? Is it plastic? Do they do sachets as opposed to the glass bottles that you're used to in your country? Are the colors of the industry the same? Do you need to shift your colors? Who are your competitors? Who would be your complements? Who are the ones in the service sector? What information do you know about your market? What's the currency? Do you have to pay before? Can you pay later? There are so many bits of information that you must put together so that you can package your product right, ship it, and get paid. But many of us, number one, don't know, or two, prefer to work through brokers. Now, there's nothing wrong with brokers. There's some really good brokers, but my God, there's some really bad ones. And many of us don't know what the tells of a bad broker are, right? Why don't we know? Because we don't have the right information to make the right choices. So access to information was big. And that one we can take 15 years and we won't exhaust everything. Because life changes consistently. So you're consistently accessing information. For instance, if I wanted to trade with another country, do I know where the trade office in my country is and how they can support me? Do I know whether they give financing for women's led businesses? Do I know whether India, the country, I can get a concession because I'm a women led business selling to another women led business? Are there trade policies? Are there laws in the government? Are there statutes in what is there to support the trade? Most of us don't know. So access to information is big. The next big access point is finances. Export is expensive. You don't export before you have saturated your market, but you also don't stop your local production to do export. You could find it's the same product, but the packaging is different. Or you could find the market you're going to requires 2 or 3 tweaks to your product to make it market fit. But I will not stop the production line for Kenya and do goods for Ethiopia because you realize you need additional funds to keep the business going. You have set up a subsidiary. That's how I like to think about export. I've set up a new business unit that needs to run itself and feed itself and grow itself. So then, do I need financing for production? Do I need financing to be able to pay for my insurance? Do I need financing to just give me a line of credit that I can keep functioning even as we continue on our journey? Access to finance is tricky because many times we need collateral to get financing, or we need fantastic negotiation powers, or we need networks, referrals, and all those things. But many of us don't have information, again, but lack information about how to get these things we need to get. That's why information for me is the primary access point. And the final access point which we need to trade is networks. So here's the example. I want to move my chili from Nairobi to Lagos. I know that Nigerians, a portion of Nigerians love chili. If you've seen the recipes online, you can smell the chili and you're watching a video. Okay? But how will my chili fare in an environment that already has so much chili? What do I need to do, or who do I need to talk to who will guide me on the right steps to understand what the market needs? If I have a friend who's in Lagos, I would ask them for help. So you have to have a network that delivers for you what you need. For instance, the AfCFTA shows, they're things I don't know. They're outside my level of bandwidth, education, understanding, all those things. But I don't have to know everything I need to know for this conversation if my network has trade experts. If my network has people who export. If my network has bankers, right? So access to networks is important in the ability to open doors and keep them open. But the other side of network is aggregation. Can I fill a whole container? Or do I know somebody with space in their container that I can piggyback my product with? Do you get me? Network is important in that capacity because it opens the doors and it keeps the doors open. So as I sat on this board, I saw those are three big access points. But all of them hinge on information. So I began asking myself, how can my skill be useful and valuable to the trade space? Also came the realization that a lot of the companies we export to, they give us trade lawyers, trade experts, consultants. But the bulk of the traders are indeed in Africa, in Latin America, because we produce for sale in other countries. But we also import a lot of the bigger things. So then my question began, how do I help people on the continent of Africa learn more about the available trade options and grow the businesses? So of course in 2018, the AU had begun discussing the AfCFTA, and when the Africa Union begins discussing things that are going to be trade policies, it takes a while. So the conversation started in 2018. 2020, it was, began the ratification process. And think about it, 55 countries, 1.3 plus billion people. We have to each individually write our rules of origin. We must submit our e-tariff book. We must set up a trade support system. We must have a national committee around the AfCFTA. So it took time to put these things into place. But when I had it, I realized that the challenges around the AfCFTA would be the same access issues that I've been seeing in international trade conversations. And I'm really, really, really happy that organizations like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, like the ITC, International Trade Corporation, the UN, UNEP, UNDP, UN Women, they're all unpacking different elements of the AfCFTA. I love that because I have places to go and study. So if they're doing the big breakdowns, why can't I add my voice to it and be a source of information? So to answer the question, why did I start talking about AfCFTA? I saw a need to bridge the access gap, and I saw that I have the gift and the skill to build that gap. And from there, it was a marriage. But somebody else asked the question, why is it important? And I'll share a few very quick thoughts. One, I believe in it. I believe in the FCFTA. It will not fully materialize in my lifetime, but my children's children will benefit from it. Secondly, lack of knowledge kills, and I have the ability to help others gain knowledge. Thirdly, if not me, then who? I can only be responsible for what I know. And finally, the more I share, the more I learn. The more I learn, the more I know. And the more I know, the more I grow. So why don't you go into your space and figure out what you know, what you can share, how you can learn it, and how you can grow. That's my AfCFTA story. Join us for the next episode of AfCFTA Files at the African MSME Collective, where we support businesses to start, stabilize, scale for sustainable success. Have a good day, a good morning, a good evening, a good night, wherever it is you're listening in from. Au revoir.